Welcome to the Happy Rebel podcast, where we explore the realms of finding your calling, living your values, and doing the work of self-healing. Through candid conversations with fellow seekers, we'll uncover ideas and concepts that challenge, expand, and empower us to embrace our authentic selves and live with intention. Hi there, I'm Kelly Street, owner of Happy Rebel and your guide on this journey. I'm known for my insatiable curiosity and tendency for pushing boundaries. I've always been a challenger, eager to question the status quo and explore the uncharted territories of personal growth. So join me as we navigate the twists and turns of life's journey, seeking out the wisdom and insights that illuminate our path towards fulfillment and rebellion against the ordinary. Before we get started, I want to remind you to connect with me on Instagram at Happy Rebel, where you can ask questions and share your thoughts. Remember, you are never alone on your path to becoming a happy rebel. This is the Happy Rebel Podcast. As we enter this moment together in the Happy Rebel Podcast, I invite you to relax your gaze or gently close your eyes. Take a full, deep breath in, and as you exhale, feel yourself grounding into your body, fully present in this space. On your next inhale, envision a golden light forming in your heart, warm and radiant. With each exhale, see that light growing, expanding outward with strength and clarity, illuminating both the bright and the shadowed corners of your inner world. As you settle into the balance of life's light and dark, take a final deep breath filled with gratitude. When you're ready, softly open your eyes and let's embark on this journey together. Welcome, 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 as always, to the space of the Happy Rebel Podcast. I am so glad you're here. Today is another solo episode. And the interesting thing about this episode is that I am going to record it in two parts. We're going to have a before and an after. So the before is before I go on this retreat that I'm about to go on in 2 weeks, actually. And the after will be, of course, after it's done. So, of all the crazy, interesting, wild things that I've done for my personal development, for my mental health, for my desire to explore and just be endlessly curious about the ways that we can heal and grow and challenge ourselves, this one, I think, honestly might be the most uncomfortable for me. So the thing I'm doing is I am doing a darkness retreat. I don't know if anybody listening will know what that is. If you've never heard of it, it became a little popularized by Aaron Rodgers. He did a darkness retreat and he's actually going to he went to the same location that I am going to. And I didn't hear about it through him. I actually found out about the idea of a darkness retreat, what it was, what it looked like. I found it on Instagram, of course, of not just of all places, but like it's where we find everything these days is through social media. And yeah, so I just kind of randomly came across this reel of someone taking a blindfold off and expressing so much gratitude for their vision, for what they could see, for light, and so much gratitude for what they learned in the darkness. And I was like, what is this thing? And so yeah, I did a little more research, and a darkness retreat is basically putting yourself into a room where there's complete lack of sensory input. So there's no light. There is no sound unless it's sound that you make yourself, or just, maybe a little bit of natural creaks in things, and no inputs from other people. So you're by yourself in a room in the dark for 3 to 5 days. And I will be in the dark for 4 days. And yeah, so there you go. That's the thing I'm about to do. And I just felt compelled. I was talking about the darkness retreat with a couple of people and why I'm doing it. And I just felt really compelled to do kind of a before and after, to compare how I felt going in and have it written down, have it recorded, have it talked about, and then also how I feel after. So there you go. Now, you might want to ask me, or you might be asking yourself, why would anyone do this kind of a thing? Why would you do a darkness retreat? What does this bring for people? And I think for a lot of people, it brings a sense of clarity about purpose, importance. It allows you to have time and space to really dive deeply into your psyche and your how you process things without having any inputs from anything outside, anything external. And for me personally, why I am deciding to or choosing to do this darkness retreat is kind of three main reasons. The first reason is that, as I have mentioned on the podcast before, I am writing a book. I'm writing a teaching memoir, is technically what it's called. And so, or the style of book that it is. And that book, the working title is something about embracing the dark. I don't know if that's what it will end up being, depends on publisher, self-publishing stuff. But the working title of Embrace the Dark is this idea that we need to embrace the shadow parts, the things in ourselves that are often really uncomfortable to navigate in our daily life. And I thought, what better way to to really capture embracing the dark than to do a darkness retreat, right? Like where I'm spending days in actual darkness. So that was one reason. Another reason is that I have been afraid of the dark since I was a kid, as long as I can remember. It's been that fear of the actual dark has been with me, to the point of I'm 38 years old now and I still have moments. It's gotten better, but I still have moments where I run up the stairs as fast as possible when the lights are out because I'm afraid of something, getting me or coming out of the dark at the bottom of the stairs. So I want to do the darkness retreat because it feels really important to my growth as a person and to my ability to be present and feel safe in my body, to learn to make friends with the dark. I've already done a lot of work to make friends with winter. I've talked about that before, and it feels just as essential to me to make friends with the dark and not be afraid of what might be around the corner. Some of this is innate. Some of this is just like human biology, survival stuff. I get that. That's part of being scared of the dark. But there's an irrational fear that I also have, a lack of safety with when I can't see what's there. And I just want to feel a little bit of softness and a little bit more ease with that. So this is a dramatic way of doing that. And there you go. The last reason why I'm doing this has come really clear through for me lately in my processing, in my journaling, and is part of my recent solo episode where I talk about burnout and needing a break, is that I am noticing coming off of that break how uncomfortable it is still for me to slow down and settle down. I am noticing that my mind is constantly busy and that I'm sort of constantly occupying myself out of anxiety or out of just kind of being afraid or uncomfortable with boredom right now. And I've always tried to maintain that boredom is a good thing, that boredom is where creativity comes in. And I'm just noticing how hard it is for me to allow myself to be quiet and still and bored right now. So I'm really, really looking forward to that aspect of the darkness retreat, to not having anything else to occupy me or keep me busy, and to hopefully being able to work through how uncomfortable that is going to be to get to the other side of slowing down. The reality is, I will speak for, I'm very scared. This feels like one of the scariest things I will do. And look, I've done a lot of weird stuff. I have done ayahuasca in the jungle in Mexico. I have sat in a circle naked with 20 other women talking about our greatest insecurities and fears about our bodies. I've kind of done a lot of the weird things you can do, a lot of the emotionally scary, vulnerable things you can do. And this one's rattling me a little bit going in. There you have it. I think that's all I have to say for my pre-darkness retreat thoughts. But I just wanted to get this noted, get this written down, how I feel going in. And I'm looking forward to seeing what I have to say on the other side. So here I am back with part 2. I did my post-darkness retreat recording, and now I'm doing I did my pre-darkness retreat recording, and now I'm doing the post-darkness retreat. So I'm actually a little bit scared and hesitant to do this part of the episode because I feel like I'm still sorting through a lot. I'm still deeply in the integration process. And so as I record this, today is Friday. I flew home on Tuesday late at night. And then Wednesday, I had a full day of clients for my therapy practice. And then Thursday, I just had an endless amount of tasks that needed to get done. So I did a lot of integration on my last day that I was at the retreat, but I haven't really had much of a chance to sit down and journal and process since getting home. So this is probably going to be a bit of that at the end. So overall, here's what I'll start with. My plan is to start with kind of talking about the progression of the days and then sharing a bit about the integration that I've already done and what I've learned from this experience thus far. So the first day I flew from Minnesota, where I live, to Oregon, and got to Oregon at about 12:30, 1 p.m. Pacific time. And Scott, the owner of Sky Cave Retreats, picked me up at the airport. We had about 45 minutes to chat on the way to the retreat center from there. And we talked about the process. We talked about what people would experience. I shared with him that I was both nervous but also excited. I was feeling fairly optimistic at that point about the time. So we get to the retreat center. He gives me a tour of my sky cave, my little hobbit house, as I prefer to call it, that I was going to be in, and said, all right, I'll be back in about 4 hours and I'll bring you your dinner and your meals for the next 24 hours at that point. And I encourage you to play around with the darkness and see what it feels like, but feel free to kind of come in and out as you please. So that afternoon and evening, I spent completely in the dark. I spent time meditating and kind of acquainting myself with this idea of complete darkness. And even though I had about 24 hours before I went fully into the dark, and I was feeling pretty good. I actually didn't really mind the dark. I didn't feel scared like I was worried I was going to. So I felt really confident and had a great night of sleep. I slept for what felt like a really long time. And my dreams were incredibly vivid. I had really intense dreams that night in kind of a positive, open way. Woke up the next day, had a full morning of continuing to try to mostly stay in the dark. I went outside a couple of times. In the afternoon, Adrienne, who is this incredible somatic practitioner that they utilize, came and gave me a session and really educated me about the experience. We talked a lot about fight, flight, freeze and stress responses. We talked a lot about how people can really feel their animalness come out in the dark. And I felt like I had a lot of tools. And after she left, that was my time to start the darkness. While I was working with her, Scott had already brought my meals for the next day. So I got those all set and I decided to light a candle and blow the candle out as kind of my ritual transition process to signify that I was in the light and I would be in the dark. My intention, without a doubt, for this, even though both Scott and Adrienne were very clear that people weave in and out of the darkness, they do sometimes come out once, multiple times a day to give themselves a break from the dark as needed. They light a candle, they turn on either the main light or on low or this small red book light that they have, just to get little breaks, because their whole thing is about, at Sky Cave Retreats, is about what would nurture do? What would nurture do in this, as a concept, as an entity, in this idea of the dark? Because it isn't supposed to be about self-torture or fighting your way through it or being scared the entire time. It's about reacquainting yourself with what the body feels and reacquainting yourself with what it's like to really care for yourself. So I had my haughty intentions of staying in the dark the whole time. And the first 24 hours of that, it felt fine. And then I started to really struggle. And I really found myself in a state of flight, feeling like I was trapped and wanted to get out. Scott came, brought me my meals, talked to me about this, talked me through it through a wall, because you don't see someone while you're in the darkness. He asked if it would be possible to allow myself to go outside, and I just wasn't ready to let myself do that yet. I needed to work through a lot of feelings of feeling like I would fail, feeling like needing something was bad or wrong. So I had to really sit with that. So I did overnight. And at that point, I was no longer really sleeping very much. This naturally happens. You're in the dark. You get a big melatonin dump, often sleep for a long time the first night. And then a number of people will experience not really sleeping after that. And that was kind of my experience. So not really sleeping for about 72 hours. And besides, like maybe a short nap or a couple of hours of sleep at night. And so over that next 48 hours that followed, I really struggled with my need to care for myself by going outside or by turning on the red light and looking around the room, because I would start to see shadows, complete darkness, but I would see shadows or I would see a little bit of light, and I would get so completely activated that despite all my meditation, all my therapy, all of my skills that I acquired over the years, they weren't enough, or they were enough, but what I needed was something else. And I think that is the rub that I'm still sitting with, is those skills have gotten me so far, and now I need to adopt and allow other skills. I need to adopt skills for allowing imperfection. I need to adopt skills for allowing for lack of control, because that was a really big awakening for me. But I'll get there. And at one point, when Scott came to check in, he asked me if it would be okay to allow myself to admit that I was struggling and that I was having a hard time. And that really broke me open. That question of, can I admit to myself that this is hard? And so I did. I really submitted to that idea and allowed myself to recognize that for me, this experience was so big. For some reason, it felt like there was so much at stake, all of these ideas that I had built up around it. And so I had to let go of my need to have it be perfect or to look a certain way, and for there to be success in the darkness. And it's just crazy to think about, isn't it? That the idea of doing a personal retreat, that there's some form of success to come from it, that like you could do it right or you could do it wrong. It is a personal, introspective, self-development retreat. It should be hard. It should bring up things. It should challenge you and simultaneously break open some things in you, but also allow for some other things to come in. So in my last 36 hours, it looked like this. It looked like me going outside once early in the morning and once when I knew that it would be dark out, after Scott had brought my dinner food and, the sun is setting quite early. And so me going outside in those darker, quieter spaces so that I could take a break and I could allow myself that. And it also looked like me on the last night that I was in the dark, turning on a light, because I found myself getting really scared. And it was me getting really scared because I had an activated part of myself, a part of myself that was me that would get scared of the dark as a child. And finally, on the last night, this part of myself showed up, and she needed me to care for her. She needed me to nurture her. And what she needed was for me to turn on the light, look around the room, show her that we were safe, take a breath, ask if she was feeling better, wait for the answer to be yes, and turn off the light. And in that moment, I felt so empowered. I felt so heard within myself. I felt so nurturing and loving to myself. It was wonderful. And then, boom, shame. I woke up the next, hours later after falling asleep and feeling so good and like I had cared for myself so well. And I was hit by this huge wave of shame for having needed that light, for having gotten scared and not being able to just power through. And that is not how I want to treat myself any longer. And that is one of the biggest takeaways that I have for my darkness retreat. But I really sat with that shame. I allowed it to be there. I let also acceptance for myself show up in that moment. And I had this whole glorious morning, hours of self-care, taking a long bath, meditating, playing my sound bowls that I brought, which playing sound bowls in the dark is a little challenging because you can't see them, but you kind of know generally where they are. So it wasn't the prettiest sound bath, but it was really lovely to have that there. And did all of these things to really nurture myself through the next hours in the dark. And Scott came the last morning. It's like 3.5 days, almost 4 full days in the dark, and came. I put an eye mask on. He led me out into the light. And the moment I felt the air on my skin again, because it had been about 24, well, probably more than 24 hours since I had last kind of peeked out into the light of the world. And the light on my skin, the cool breeze, all of it was so immediately overwhelming, as well as knowing that my time there had come to an end. It was so overwhelming and emotional that I started shaking so uncontrollably that I couldn't speak. I could barely sit. I was a shaky chihuahua in that moment. And so then eventually, I took the blindfold off and looked out at the world and was reminded that I don't want to miss a second of this life by focusing on the things that are wrong with me or imperfect or things that are hard to accept. I'm going to keep fighting to accept all of those things about myself. And by fighting, I don't mean like, why can't I love myself more? I mean, fighting as a soft warrior or a gentle warrior would, of, okay, that's allowed. That can all be allowed. So there you have it. A couple of the things I want to, so I guess before I get there, I came out of the darkness, and then I had the next 24 hours to continue to weave in and out of the dark and also allow myself to settle back in, because it was really dysregulating to come out and not having seen a human for 3.5 days, even just that small amount. It was really disruptive the first time I saw a person other than Scott. And I was like, whoa, not ready for this. Don't want human interaction. And so that last 24 hours, I spent the remainder of the morning after I came out of the dark outside in the sun, really consciously trying to re-regulate my system to the light so I could hopefully sleep a little bit more that night. I was a little bit worried about, again, getting just what felt like maybe a couple of hours of sleep before having a long travel day the next day, and then a full day of clients getting home, and on and on. So I spent several hours outside. I then turned my phone back on, checked in with my husband, and deleted a whole bunch of emails, but tried not to really engage with much of anything. And after that, I put my phone back on airplane mode and went back into the dark and chose to have the last 18 hours that I was at Sky Cave back in the dark. And it felt really good because I was no longer forcing myself to be in that place, to be in the dark. I was just being. I was choosing the darkness. Even though I had chosen it before, there was something about it's technically over that I could actually just allow myself to relax and not have to be in the fight of staying in the dark. That felt so different. There is that. Now, I just want to mention a couple of my takeaways from the darkness retreat. And there are still a lot of things that I'm learning or integrating, but there are kind of four big things that I really took away from this experience. The first one is that support is hard. When I sat with why support was difficult for me, I felt like support could get taken away or be used against me. There were strings attached to the support. The second thing that was difficult was, or that I really learned, is that vulnerability is scary. I felt unprotected. It made all of my defenses rise up. And then what came through on the other side of that was vulnerability is simply honesty. And I would rather be vulnerable and honest than wear my defenses and be in a state of pretending. The third thing that really came through for me was that judgment. Judgment was me not sitting with or acknowledging my own discomfort. It was me deflecting my emotions onto someone or something else outside of me. And so if I can see when judgment is coming up and I can ask myself how I really feel, then I can address the truth of what the situation is. The fourth thing was that really came through was when I experience big feelings, I noticed just how consistently I want to fight, I want to run away, or I want to freeze and shut down. And most of the time I was in my retreat, I was spending time staying with these stress responses that were coming up and really allowing myself to be with them and not push them away or not push it down. Because what happens in my daily life is that I feel stressed, I feel anxious, and then I try to go and do something or watch something or listen to something. I try to do all of these things so I don't actually have to feel. That feels, as someone who works in mental health, that really sucks to have to admit, doesn't it? Really, really just got me. But I was like, okay, now I know. Now I know that this is a thing that I am doing. I can own it and be with it, and then hopefully be able to let some of those things go. Overall, that was the slowest, hardest trip of my life. I don't really mean to put it into the category of other therapy things I've done, because it's just such a completely different experience. Because it was also the most deeply moving and internally settling experience of them all. To be just in the quiet, in the complete darkness, and not have any other inputs, there was something so peaceful and lovely about it. For the times when I was when I was feeling that way. There's also something completely unsettling about it. And so both of those things were existing, and all I could do was just let them both be there, because that's all you can do. So there you have it. That is from pre to post, start to finish, before, during, and after. That is my darkness retreat experience. Would I recommend it to anyone else? Very sparingly. Very, very sparingly. If it's something that you really, truly feel called to do, if you have like a, flutter or excitement or something that comes up in you that says, oh, I want that, that's for me, go for it, do it. If you just want to find another way to do some weird stuff, maybe not. Maybe don't go for it. Or do. Really, I think, would I recommend it? If someone wants to do it, yes, I would recommend it. If you're not interested in it, then don't. It's not for you, and that's okay. So that's all. Thank you so much for listening and hearing about my experience, and let me know your thoughts if this is something that you're interested in doing, or if you've done one. I would love to talk to somebody else who has done a darkness retreat. So thank you and bye. Thank you for being part of the Happy Rebel podcast community. Stay connected with us on Instagram at Happy Rebel. If you've enjoyed our episodes, please consider rating, liking, and reviewing the podcast. It truly does help us grow. Until next time, this is Kelly Street. Remember, embrace the dark and the light.